Today's show is sponsored by Indie Film Hustle TV, the world's first streaming service dedicated to filmmakers, screenwriters, and content creators. I'd like to welcome to the show Jason Van Genderen, man. Thank you so much for being on the show, brother.
Alex, it's amazing to finally meet you rather than just listening to you through the podcast channels. Finally get to see you and hear your voice one-on-one. It's fantastic, mate.
It's awesome, man. And we are having this is like a international call. So you are in Australia. What time is it over there right now? It sounds so weird when you hear that, but like, what time is it in Australia?
I know. Well, it's almost coming up to 10:30 in the morning for me here.
Oh, nice.
So nice sunny morning.
So you are in the future, so you can tell me what happens.
I can tell you everything that happens. We're at least a good half day ahead of you.
Exactly. Well,
I think that's probably the only time Australia is considered to be ahead of anywhere in the world. So
fair enough. So thank you again for jumping on, man. And the reason I wanted to put you on is because you have a very unique set of skills that we have not had a guest on the show before, which is iPhone filmmaking or pocket filmmaking, as you put it. So we're going to get deep into that. But first, how did you get into this crazy business we like to call the film industry?
Well, my checkered background really started in the world of advertising. So I was working as an art director in the advertising industry for about 13 years and got really, really tired of just making 30-second and 45-second stories.
I feel you.
Yeah. And just thought there must be another life beyond that. So basically, I set up my own little business, a production business called Treehouse 17 years ago. And from there, we started pretty much as an advertising branding agency. We started working more in television and video and online. And now it's 100% of our business. We do a lot of branded content. So we do a lot of commercial content. We do a lot of social content for a lot of brands all around the world. And in the spare time, I still make my own films and make a lot of training resources and have really, as you said before, I've not that I've fallen in love with making things on smartphones, but smartphones really found me as a way of making content. And I was so surprised by what they could create as a tool that I started digging deeper and was just so pleasantly surprised by how deep we could take the technology and the level of what we could actually create with this new miniaturization of our cameras.
It is like the latest stuff. I mean, they're really powerful cameras. I mean, they have some insane capabilities that literally it's sitting around in your pocket. But a lot of people just don't know what to do with it because you are not trained anywhere how to shoot with an iPhone. It's not in a film school. It's not generally in the mainstream. Everyone looks down upon it because, it's just an iPhone. But Sean Baker kind of taught us a little bit about that with his amazing film Tangerine. By the way, what did you think of Tangerine when you saw it?
Incredible. I watched it in flight somewhere on the way to another festival. And I thought it was, he shot that on iPhone 5, I think, or 5S.
I think it was 5S, if I'm not mistaken. It was either 4S.
5S?
I think it might have even been 4S, but it might have been 5. Yeah, because I own a 6. I own a 6S. I haven't jumped yet, so I think it was 1 or 2 back. It was a while ago. Yeah.
I think it was a trailblazing project, and it was very brave, very adventurous, and again, with every great story, you're watching a film that, sure, it's been shot on a smartphone. Maybe that's how you come across Tangerine initially to watch it. But I think, a few minutes in, you are totally swept into that story. And that's, the great charm of any film, regardless of what we make it on, is all about creating that incredible story. And I think that's the voice we need to rise to the top through this. It's not so much about what camera we're filming on. It's about enabling ourselves to tell better stories in more ways.
No, without question. And when I had Sean on the show to talk about that a while ago, and he actually told me, he's like, we played in Sundance and nobody knew that we shot it on iPhone. Like after the first screening, at the very end, it said shot on an iPhone, and everybody just mind blew up. It was like insane.
And I think that was an absolute stroke of brilliance on Sean's behalf, because a lot of people would have had the temptation of actually saying right up front,
"Oh yeah, lead with it."
This is what it's made on. But yeah, it's incredible the fact that he did that. Like I said, it's extremely brave, but very credible film. It's deserved all the success it's enjoyed, and yeah, I think wonderful, a great example of exactly what we're talking about today, which is the fact that people anywhere with a fantastic idea can actually realize their story in some capacity if they just rethink the tools that they have accessible to them now already. Mm-hmm. And certainly our smartphones are a fantastic way of upskilling our filmic ability.
Yeah, without question. So from what I read about you, there was this like famous moment where you literally threw away your high-end video camera or film camera. Well, it was a video camera, I guess, and just said, "Screw it, I'm going iPhone all the way." What was that moment, and what caused you to go down that road?
You're going down the rabbit hole now, Alex. This is a crazy story. So this takes us all the way back to 2008.
What? That was like yeah. What, that's years, decades, millions of years ago.
10 years ago. 10 years ago. It's just crazy. And to think that this is, I think, 2 years in on having cameras on smartphones.
Right.
Commercially. So iPhone had only just released the year before. I'm not even sure if the 2008 version of the iPhone could record video, but the camera that I had back then was a Nokia N95, a little sliding smartphone. And I remember carrying this thing around, looking at it, and wondering whether one day we'd actually end up telling stories on our smartphones, whether we could use them as actual camera tools. So I pretty much just walked around and with a couple of friends of mine, Shane Emmett and John Roy, who's this fantastic musical composer, we started talking one day. I said, I'd love to make a film on a smartphone and see if we could actually ever get that into a film festival. Mm-hmm. And of course, sitting here in Australia, our aim was to try and get into an international film festival. Right. So we had this concept of those magnetic poetry kits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Fridge. You can make it a poem about something. Someone adds something to it as they walk past the fridge. It's a cool little idea. So we thought, well, what if we could do that with a smartphone film? What if we could actually walk around the city? And so we walked around Sydney with this little Nokia, and we just filmed words on signs. So we were I guess harvesting words from shop fronts and vans parked on the side of the street, from the sidewalk, from anywhere we could see signage and words. We'd start filming individual words. We had no concept of a script. We had no storyboard. We had no budget. And we were working with a smartphone. That was it, back in 2008. We ended up collecting 1,200 words. I remember Bluetoothing them one at a time from the phone to my Mac.
Yeah, there was no way to hook it up back then. Yeah, there was no way to hook it up back then. That's right.
No way, absolutely no way. But still, we were blitzed by that science. We're like, wow, you can actually wirelessly transmit this thing from a phone to a device.
It's fairly insane. That technology is fairly insane.
It is. So we ended up with 1,200 words, and we decided to try and make a film out of that. And of course, it was the complete 101 way of do not try and make a short film this way. We had no concept of really what we were making a film about. We had, like I said before, no script, no storyboard. So we realized as we were capturing these words on street signs that we were very affected by homeless communities in the city, and the fact that you can walk down the street and you can walk past 10, 20 homeless people a day and never look them in the eye. They kind of become part of the furniture in the city.
The landscape,
they're almost wallpaper. The landscape, yeah. And so we decided we would try and make a project that, I guess, a story that spoke to that and questioned whether there was another way we could connect with one another on that level. And so we wanted to make a film about homeless societies in cities, in urban environments. And Shane and we sat there looking at this list of 1,200 words for 3 nights in a row and trying to find something to stitch together into a narrative. And nothing really happened. It was just like, it was like going to the dentist 3 times in a row. It was, honestly, we were sitting there, just nothing was coming to us. And then I remember one night we contacted John Roy, this composer friend of ours, and we said, look, we've got this idea of a film. We want to cut these things together, these words. We've got some shots of these incredible homeless people we've met along the way. We want to make a story about homeless societies in an urban environment and our sense of disconnect with that. We want like a piano score, but it has to be like plinky plonk so we can cut the words on certain notes. And I'm totally from a non-musical background. So when I say plinky plonk, that's pretty advanced technical musical speak from my side.
Same here.
And But I know what I like, right? So I sent him a page with 12 images on it from the shoot, and he went away and composed this incredible 3.5-minute piece, which he almost threw away. And he phoned me the next day. I said, "Look, I've got one little piece of music, but I want to just fine tune it now." I said, "No, John, send it through," and he did. And Shane and I listened to it and just knew instantly it was the right piece of music for this film. You could hear the breath in the piano strings. It was incredible. And the film we made was called Mankind is No Island. Mm-hmm. We ended up being inspired by the music. The words started leaping off the page once we heard the music. We started finding all of those connections. We put this together. We entered it into a film festival in New York called Tropfest New York. Mm-hmm. And Tropfest at that stage was Australia's biggest short film festival. It attracted an annual live audience of between 80 and 100,000 people.
I'm sorry, how much?
80 to 100,000.
For a short film festival?
For a short film festival, this is right, on a Sunday evening, on a Sunday summer's evening in Sydney.
Is there nothing else to do in Sydney during that night? Like, I don't understand. That's mind-blowing. Even Sundance doesn't get like that many people. Even Sundance doesn't even get that many people. That's crazy.
Correct. It is like a rock concert for short filmmakers.
That's awesome.
It is absolutely insane. So they had a version in New York, and we decided to enter it into that. Okay. And that's where the whole story for us started. We ended up getting selected, flew across for the festival. We played the film. We won People's Choice as well. We got Best Film, and it just started this whole conversation rolling in a much bigger space. And we did lots of media interviews and lots of talks at other film festivals and universities and film colleges. And yeah, it just started this love of actually not being confined so much by the limitations in the gear we didn't have to tell stories, and actually looking at what we did have available to us and how we could appropriate it and appropriate the concepts that we're working on to be told with simpler tools, simpler camera tools.
And that film cost you $57, if I read correctly.
57 Australian dollars.
Wow, so it's not even American dollars. So wow, that's like
not even American. So it would have been 42 or 3 American dollars to make.
And then how much? How much prize money?
Today, so it's still actually going in festivals around the world. There's 10 years on. It's still doing the rounds, and it managed to win over $33,000 in prize money.
That's insane! Oh my god! Like that is the hustle. That is the indie film hustle without question. Look, I thought I was rough because my first short film, I had it running in festivals probably like 4 or 5 years. And you're still going 10 years in. That's insane.
10 years. Yeah, it's not competing anymore, but it's still getting invitations all the time to screen, and it's amazing. I just love those little projects you work on, those little experimental projects that end up surprising you as the creator as well as the audience. And I think for us, it's the gift that keeps on giving. It's the film story that just keeps on traveling around the world, finding new audiences, and I watch it every now and then. It still teaches me a little bit about what I'm doing. It still has little gems to give. You know,
it's funny. Because a lot of the people a lot of my collaborators I worked on with that short film, they kept every time they would see that short film, my short film, come back up, they're like, "Isn't that horse dead? Like, didn't you kill that? Like, you've ridden that horse as long as you can."
I'm like, anything since?
I'm like, no, I just inject them with some adrenaline, pick the horse back up, and just keep riding him until it keeps going. So, hey, if it keeps going, why not, right? I mean, if people still want to see it, it's all good. And then what was did you distribute that film? Did you actually put it somewhere to be watched or sold, or is it strictly just offline?
Literally just offline on festivals. It is online at the moment on the Tropfest YouTube channel.
Okay.
So it's had a life there. It's had over 1 million views on there. It's crazy. I mean, short film in Australia is a really strong, healthy medium for creatives coming out of colleges and film schools. It's something we really actively embrace, and I feel really fortunate that even in little old Australia, we can actually say we've got a film festival that draws a live audience of 80 to 100,000 a year. It's just insane. And when filmmakers come from overseas, they've never experienced anything like that. They walk into this field and they see this sea of people, and they think they're at some crazy concert. It's just an incredible experience.
I mean, you're almost inspiring me to make a short film. I mean, I got to send something over there because I just want to experience that. That sounds amazing for a filmmaker. Yeah. Look, there's very few venues, very few things out there. Cannes, Sundance, Toronto, they don't bring in 100,000 eyeballs. That's insane. I know. Yeah. That's like YouTube numbers. Like you get 100,000 views.
That's it. Yeah. So if any filmmakers want to make a trip to Australia, try and make it around February when Tropfest screens in Australia, and come and experience the festival. Because as a filmmaker, it's just this energy of even just being in the audience, even if you don't have a film in the festival, just being in that crowd and seeing 80 to 100,000 people react and respond at once to something they see on a screen is just mind-blowing. It gives me chills just speaking about it.
Yeah, because it's nothing that no normal filmmakers don't get that. Like, even the biggest blockbusters from Hollywood doesn't get that all in one. You don't get an 80 to 100,000 people watching Avengers. Like, it doesn't happen. So that must be amazing. So let me ask you a few tips for making your iPhone more cinematic, because that is because iPhones is like any other tool. You could use it poorly or you could use it really well. Yeah.
So there's probably a couple of key things. One would be you need to obviously understand the strengths and the limitations of your iPhone as a camera tool. It's got a tiny lens. It's got a tiny imaging chip. Obviously the latest versions of the iPhone have stepped it up in quality again, and they've got incredible dynamic range now. So the things that I would say from the get-go you really need to focus on in accessorizing your phone to make it a real cinematic capture tool would be, first of all, there's an app called Filmic Pro. Yeah. Which is the same app that Sean Baker filmed on as well, filmed Tangerine on too. It gives you complete manual control over all the camera inputs on your iPhone. So if you can imagine the kind of controls you have on a DSLR camera, you can have those on your iPhone with Filmic Pro. So it's invaluable. It's the #1 selling manual camera app around the world, I believe. And it allows you to then work with a whole host of other accessories, which you can obviously then put onto your phone to expand what it can see optically, what it can hear. So yeah, Filmic Pro, that'll be the first thing I tell people to do. Rush out, find that app, put it on your phone and play with it. And
it's pretty cheap too, right?
It's incredible.
It's like $10.
I'm not sure what it is in America.
10, 15 bucks?
Well, probably. I think it's around 20 something here in Australia. But it's, isn't it funny these days with apps we talk about, paying anything for an app. And whenever I go to a film college and I say, you need to buy this app and it's $20. And they go like, what? That's crazy. I'm never paying $20 for an app. But, you're expanding the functionality of your device so much. Everybody wants everything for free. It's insane.
Tell me about it, brother. I know.
Yeah.
I completely understand what you're saying.
Totally. So Filmic Pro is the bedrock. That's the thing I would start with, and of course it's available in an Android version as well. So if you're not on iPhone, if you've got something else, you can run Filmic Pro. It's amazing. The other thing that is a real game changer with iPhone, we call it iPhoneography, is
trademark.
Trademark that. Is the ability to add accessory lenses now. So a lot of people they've heard of lens clips like Olo Clip or Moment lenses and things like that, which have their own sort of fastening system onto your phone. B-Script make an incredible cage system for your iPhone or for any smartphone, and they have a device called a DOF2, which is a depth of field converter. And essentially it's a barrel which attaches to their B-Script camera cage, which you put your phone in. And it allows you to then accessorize your iPhone with any number of different DSLR lenses or cine lenses.
Is it worth it? Because that's a lot of glass going through.
That's a lot of glass.
So is it going to degrade the image a bunch, or is it worth it?
It's definitely worth it. If you want to work with nice shallow depth of field, it's really at the moment the only real way we can do it until computational imaging sort of steps it up another couple of notches, and we can get the effect of what we see in portrait still mode now on our phones.
Right.
But when we can get that in video mode, then that kind of is another conversation again. But in the meantime, if you do love that beautiful cinematic look of layering the focus in your vision, you need something like a depth of field converter to actually attach accessory lenses to your smartphone. And Look, it is great. It does cut back the light input a little bit, because essentially what you're telling the lens to do is to focus on another focusing screen inside the depth of field converter. And that sounds all very technical, but in the end of the day, it allows your iPhone to be able to see through any lens pretty much you can put in front of it. And we've seen things captured. We've certainly captured things ourselves here commercially through lenses that people would never ever guess have been attached to a phone. They wouldn't think it's been filmed on a smartphone.
I mean, I think you and I are similar vintages as far as our age is concerned. So you might remember this camera. You remember the DVX 100A Panasonic?
Yes.
It was wonderful. Wasn't that the most beautiful camera ever? It was the first 24p, the first 24p camera. And it had a stock lens on it. It was a beautiful lock lens, but then you couldn't get that depth. So you had the 35 millimeter adapter, and then you could put on those things, but then you would automatically lose like a stop or two. So you had to
totally
pump. So similar in that way.
And I think it had like a glass. Didn't it have like a glass?
Oh, it had the mirror spinner. Yeah, the spinner
or something. And
I did a movie once that because I shot my film on the DVX, and I had I had a screw-in adapter, not the 35, but a screw-in.
Yeah.
To get the wide angle.
Yeah.
Just to get the. Sorry, everybody, we're geeking out old school now.
Yeah, we are geeking out.
But I had a film that came in. It was $1 million feature film that they shot on the DVX. I don't know why, but they did. This is back years ago, and they never attached the adapter properly. And in the top corner, you would see the mirror. Like the little circle, like flickering.
Oh.
The whole movie, all the footage. I'm like, it was a first time DP, but that's a whole other story for a whole other movie, podcast. But that was the technology we were dealing with. But the reason I brought that up is because it did drop a lot of, it dropped stops. So I'm assuming that this is similar, that you've got to pump more light in.
More light, and that is an absolute given with all smartphones and any small lens camera. We need to, smaller sensors need more light, so we need to work with more light when we're shooting. Although, having said that, the new 10S, the dynamic range in that is incredible. We took that out for a camera test a couple of weeks ago at a film festival here in Australia. Just comparing the 10 to the 10S in nighttime tests, and the amount of extra latitude and exposure was insane. It's like 30 to 40% more light coming in low light situations.
Now,
which was incredible.
Are you finding more filmmakers using this as a serious package? Because I don't see a lot. I mean, other than Sean Baker, and there's a handful of other outliers, and yourself, obviously. But have you run across other filmmakers who are doing serious work with iPhones?
We have. We've actually started to see the explosion of smartphone film festivals really started taking off.
Yeah.
So earlier this year, I was at one in San Diego, run by Susan Botello. Amazing smartphone film fest. Went to one in Zurich, the Momo Film Festival. Here in Australia, we've got SF3 Smartphone Flick Fest. These are getting big support. It played at the Opera House in Sydney. I mean, that's how much attention these festivals are getting. People are rocking up at the Opera House, a landmark building here in Australia, to watch films all created on a smartphone. And people are really starting to push the boundaries. It's not just people picking these up and a weekend hack, someone just having a go at their first time at storytelling. We're seeing real capable storytellers picking up their smartphones and really experimenting with the media and pushing the envelope as to what it can do as a camera tool. And of course, these days too, we can accessorize with any microphone. Mm-hmm. We can put wireless microphones on our smartphones and capture dialogue from a distance without being connected with leads. We can do all that sort of thing.
Yeah, I was going to actually ask you, how do you record professional sound? Because a lot of people will just pick up and go, action, and be like, no, that's not going to work real well.
Well, we work with all the full range of pro microphones we've used in any other kind of production. We can still work with our smartphones as well, or you obviously still have the choice of recording your audio separately and syncing it in post. We generally do both. We record into the camera as well as have backup audio too. We can never have enough backups of audio. Mm-hmm. So accessory microphones are definitely out there for less than $100. You can buy a really incredible quality microphone to improve the quality of the sound on your smartphone 300%. And It's a no-brainer. When you see people actually starting to accessorize with a couple of $100 worth of equipment and they see the leap in quality that they're achieving, they just get the bug and they want to get more and more and more. And the amount of times I've been on red carpets at film festivals and I pull out my little smartphone rig and I'm just doing some little vox pops with someone or someone I've met that I want to ask a question to, and I get one or two questions out, and then instantly it's finished. All the producers and directors just start coming over. They're taking photos of the phone rig. They want to know what it is. How do you shoot with it? Where do I get it? It still seems to be such a new conversation. But the more that people are seeing it, the more they're getting exposed to it, the more they're understanding that there's a place in their production kit for a smartphone, a broadcast smartphone kit.
Now, let me ask you, because there is a stigma around shooting with an iPhone. I mean, Sean Baker definitely broke that down a bunch. But everybody, I mean, I've talked to people, professionals, snooty, let's call them snooty LA guys, who's like, that's not a real cinema phone. I mean, that's this or that.
Yeah.
And you know what? You can't compete. An iPhone's not going to compete with Alexa. It's just not going to, period. Yeah. It's never going to. But it will put the power of being able to tell a story in the hands of someone who can't maybe afford or get access to an Alexa. Now, how do you, because I know a lot of people listening right now, their egos are full right now. People listening, I promise you, someone out there is going, this is ridiculous. I would never. I'm a serious.
Probably tuned out already.
Exactly. Like I'm a serious cinephile. I'm a filmmaker. I don't shoot with an iPhone. That's what's in my pocket. I talk on that. I text on that. But what do you say to people like that? Because I mean, I'm always about like whatever's the best tool for. I shot my last film on a pocket camera, so it's just like what's the proper tool? It's not perfect for everything. If you're going to shoot a $500,000 movie, iPhone might not be the right tool for it. But if you're doing shorts or you're doing a smaller micro budget feature, man, you could get a lot of bang for your buck. So what do you say to people like that who have that? And I'm sure you've run into them. I'm positive you've run into them.
All the time. And they're my favorite people to convert when I go to a festival. And they're I mean, some of my peers I work with in the industry here are still saying I've got rocks on my head. But
right.
When I show them what's possible with the equipment, they quickly change their mind. And I think, as you said, there is a definite stigma associated with not having a large camera in your hands when you're going to film a serious project. But we can turn that stigma around too. I think that stigma is something that's been a bit of a stain on the industry as a whole for a long time. A lot of people feel that there hasn't been room for them. There hasn't been an inclusion there because they don't have access to that Red Epic, or they don't have the means available to them to tool up with what's considered to be a proper cinematic camera or a broadcast camera. And they've not gone into storytelling or filmmaking because of that. And I think that's a great shame because I've met some incredible writers, I've met some incredible producers and wannabe cinematographers that have incredible ideas that just have put them on ice for 3, 4, 5 years, and they may never make them because they just don't think those things are available to them. So the great joy here is actually saying we can turn that stigma around and actually say that stigma is probably one of the strengths of smartphone cinematography, in that you can actually be a storyteller anywhere, anytime with that thing that's in your pocket. And no one's going to question you. You can be a one-person production team. Yeah. You can be operating very frugally. You could be in the middle of Times Square filming this incredible shot, but nobody knows whether you're filming it just for a social feed or whether you're actually making something that's going to screen at Sundance. You're never going to get a tap on the shoulder by the security guards or the local administration asking you for your film permits. You're never going to – you see what I'm saying? You can really fly under the radar with a small camera like a smartphone. And even when it's accessorized with some lenses and audio, we've never, ever been kicked out of an area. We've never been stopped from filming. We've never been considered a serious crew, and that's part of what I love. We can actually travel around. We can get these incredible stories. We can capture this incredible footage, and we're never hindered in our way. And it's such an enabler for us in capturing story. I love it. For me, that's what I love doing. I'm a documentary filmmaker, so for me, being able to run around like a ninja and capture and create story and not be burdened by the process or the people around me or the environment that I'm filming in is a wonderful joy. And it's something that's allowed me to actually make stories I couldn't make any other way.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was a lot like when the DSLRs first came out. People were making, like Michael Polish's film For Lovers Only or things like that, where they literally went to Paris and shot everywhere. in restaurants, because people thought they were taking pictures. The technology was so new, and now similar things with iPhones. Like they're not professionals, obviously. They don't know what they're doing, obviously. So let's not bother them. I even ran across that with the Pocket. Like with my Pocket camera, people were like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm shooting a feature." Like, what? Like it's mind blowing. But you could sneak in with those kind of cameras, and the iPhone's the ultimate of that because everybody knows that camera. I mean, knows that device, so you'll never get caught with it. And do you feel like,
Alex, it's happened all through the chain? Sorry, I was just going to say it's happened all through the chain of evolution in camera craft. If we look back to the very begin with film cameras, actual film cameras, when the digital video camera revolution came along, the film industry, the film camera industry, all those traditional cinematographers did not rate the digital camera setups. They never thought they were going to have a long-lasting place in the industry. And of course, history tells us otherwise. When the first DSLR came out, I think in 2007 or 8, with the ability to actually film video.
Yeah, I remember the 5D when the 5D video came out. Yeah.
When that first one came out with the record capacity for video, the digital video camera market said that's not a proper camera. That's not how we're going to record video. Of course, everybody denied that was actually going to make any kind of inroads in our industry. And now we're sitting at that other chapter. We've got the further miniaturization of our craft. We've got smartphones. We've got action cameras, adventure cameras. We've got all sorts. We've got wearable cameras coming next. We've got so many things that are new to the industry. And of course, everyone shooting on a DSLR or a digital video camera or anything else is going, no, that's definitely not a serious camera. History will prove that different. And again, it's not about saying, smartphone cameras are going to overtake the industry and, every other kind of camera is going to disappear. Of course, that's not going to happen.
No.
But what we do need to be aware of is the fact that, for some of those productions or some elements of your production, maybe a smartphone camera is actually going to be able to capture that scene or tell that story better than something else you already have in your kit.
Yeah, and without question. No, absolutely, without question. And you could sneak into places with that small camera and get shots. I do actually know of a few filmmaking DPs who are on network shows who will do a little and they'll intercut. And if it's a quick little action thing or something like that, it works. It really works.
Try to get away with it. A couple of weeks ago, Alex, I actually was a guest at one of our major television networks here in Australia. There was 240 of their executives gathered around in one of their big studios. They have one of these get-togethers every 3 months, and they have guest speakers from all sides of the film and television industry come in and address them once every quarter. I came in to talk to them about what smartphones are going to do, what space is there for smartphones in the broadcast television world, and I would have thought that would have been a really hostile audience going in and speaking to all those executives and network producers and series producers, and they loved it. They were totally on board. They loved opening their minds to what they could do, and of course, we'd be having DOPs working on TV series coming up to us afterwards saying, we've been filming with the same cameras for 20 years, and we're not allowed to upgrade our cameras because of budget, but we could afford 2 or 3 of these kits to accessorize what we're doing in our production. And so they're seeing the opportunity for it, and there's definitely space for it in the industry. And when people start seeing some, in the coming years, we'll see some more feature films. We'll definitely see a lot more documentaries coming out that have been created on smartphones. And I think that'll help really change, be a catalyst of change for that conversation. And, you can buy a $120 anamorphic lens to put on the front of your phone and capture a beautiful anamorphic picture.
Right.
Like with anamorphic lens smears, the whole thing. And it fits in your pocket. It is insane. It's crazy.
Do you feel like it's? The iPhone revolution or the smartphone revolution is kind of similar to what happened with the DSLRs. Like people were like only like the first early adopters would go in and start playing and toying and making little films with it and all that kind of stuff. And now I feel that that's what's happening with iPhone technology and with smartphone technology.
Completely. In fact, we run a production agency here in Australia, and we earlier this year became the first production house in Australia to actually downscale our tools So we now actually shoot all of our television commercials and all of our brand content for big brands exclusively on iPhones. We do it all on iPhones with accessory lenses, accessory microphones. Everything we produce out of our production agency is all sourced on a phone.
Now, how is it when you show up to set and you bust open the iPhone? Like, how is that?
Fantastic. I love it.
No, but like other people, like what does the other people say? I have to believe that like you show up and there's a crew and they're like, no, seriously, what are we shooting on?
Yeah. Instead of 20 people, there's 5 people. And then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, but you guys aren't serious. You're just doing the social stuff, right? No. We're actually doing the broadcast stuff today. And it's amazing because it opens so many conversations. When we're filming talent, they love it because it's a completely different way of working. And they find they're more in the moment rather than the process of the filmmaking process. So it's a bit of a liberator for talent as well. And definitely, you know, when we're doing documentary interviews, there's nothing like putting an unassuming camera setup in front of a documentary subject and getting them to open up. We have been able to get so many more incredibly deep conversations going through using smartphones as camera capture tools as opposed to traditional camera setups. For people that aren't used to being in front of the camera, it is an incredible enabler. And absolutely, without a doubt, we've made stories that wouldn't have ever made it to air if it wasn't for the iPhone as a capture tool.
Now, yeah, and you touched on something I would love to kind of dig a little deeper into talent. I mean, obviously in the documentary world, you're right, because if, you know, obviously documentaries, want people to open up, and when they see this Alexa or red rig, which tend to be huge sometimes, it could be especially intimidating for people who are not versed in our world. But when you're like, okay, we're just going to shoot this just open up. It's fine. It's fine. That I have to believe is a lot better on a documentary standpoint, but also just as actors, you know, there's a freedom and a speed that you can move with these rigs. You know, even with my experience with shooting with the small camera, I was able to move so quickly, and the actors were just like like there's no going back to the trailer for an hour while we reset. No. We're going.
There's a flow.
And there's an energy to it. So I'd love to talk to you about that.
Yeah, totally. We find exactly the same. It's, you know, it's so much faster to do scene transitions, to lighting setups are simpler. Everything is a lot more simpler. And so we find we have more ability to block through a scene. We have more ability to work through the dialogue, the transactions. We see a lot more scope, a lot more experimentation with what we're capturing as opposed to being extremely didactic about what we're wanting to shoot. And we call it lean forward filmmaking. We think it's really this sense of stepping on set and we actually have the camera in hand ready to go, and we let the camera almost show and guide for us what could be a good flow for the camera movement, what could be, you know, good coverage in the scene. It's quite different to actually sitting there and, first of all, overly pre-producing how we're going to actually capture that scene, how we're going to lens it, how we're going to light it, all that sort of thing. We find that there's just this there's almost like an organic nature to the production, which is really nice. And particularly, I think, for people that are not really versed with working with larger crews, that are relatively new to working with other people, I think anything you can do to help keep your crew small, to keep your equipment tight,
overhead,
to be able to give you more flexibility in your shoot day and then in your call sheet, I think all that stuff's all a positive. So it's a great way to actually really give yourself many more options than what you probably would do with a traditional camera setup.
And at the end of the day, and I think we could both agree on this, it doesn't really matter what the hell you shoot on, is what's the story. And that's what people get so I mean, I did full podcasts about stop obsessing about gear. No one gives a crap. Like, they really don't. Only guys like you and me will go, so what you shoot on? Like, really? But
exactly.
People watching a film on Netflix doesn't care if they shot on Alexa, on Red, on Blackmagic, on an iPhone. It doesn't matter. But people, I think, and you might, I'd love to hear what you think about it. But I think a lot of times filmmakers use that as an excuse not to actually be filmmakers because they hide behind it.
I totally agree. And I think you and I have both gone to the exact same networking opportunities at festivals where you step into a room of fellow creatives, filmmakers, you meet one another, and nobody talks about the project they're working on. They say, oh, I've just been shooting something on XYZ.
Right.
You know, they're straight away, they're into the gear. They're straight away, it's all about the box. And I'm sure if you go to, you know, a great restaurant and go and have a chat to some chefs, they're not talking about what brand knife they've been chopping vegetables and fish with that night. Right. They're talking about something entirely different. You know, when we think about, you know, incredible performers on stage, the first thing they don't credit their success with is the brand of the microphone that they're singing into or the PA system. Right. You know, but somehow in the filmmaking industry, we're still very caught up in the fact that it's all about boxes and lenses.
It's marketing, though. It's the marketing of it's the marketing of the companies, though. The companies want you to continue to buy new lenses, buy new cameras, buy new everything. So it gets and you hear it from the beginning of your career. So you get caught up in it. I've kind of let go of that now. I'm like, what's the right tool for the job? Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And it's become almost like a skin, I feel. It's like something you said before, like we wrap it over ourselves like a mask. And we're talking about the equipment and the gear seems to be an easier thing to do than actually opening up about what we're trying to say with what we're capturing. And I think as soon as we can start changing those conversations, it's actually, Alex, the same reason why I never go and introduce myself as a filmmaker anymore. As of earlier this year, I now call myself a film breaker, because I feel the way I make films is at odds with what the industry perception of normal is. And so I think I tend to break a lot of rules when I make my films rather than making them. So when I say I'm a filmmaker and I step in that same environment, you know, what's the first question you think someone asks you when you say you're a filmmaker? What's the next thing that comes out of their mouth?
Oh, what are you shooting on?
Or what films have you made that I know?
Well, there's that too.
Chances are, there's not a lot. You know, there's probably not a lot that I've made that most people would have seen. So
yeah, you're right.
You're right. Like myself as a film breaker, that introduces a conversation rather than stopping it with, you know, a period in the conversation. It's a way of enabling people to understand that there's more than one way to make a film come alive.
I always tell people that, you know, if you give a canvas and paint and brush to Basquiat, Warhol, and Pollock, you're gonna get paint on a canvas. But how you get it is up to them, and it really doesn't matter the style you make it. Like I know I've worked with filmmakers who, and I've also talked to filmmakers who are completely improv films. Like I've done my last two films were fairly, you know, structured outlines in film, and you know, and that's the first time I ever did that. Before that, it was more structured and storyboards and previs and all that kind of stuff. But there's millions of different ways to tell the story. But at the end of the day, and I think this is where filmmakers get so just miss the mark, it is about what story you're trying to tell. How are you trying to impact the world in one way, shape, or form? Whatever what's your take on it? What is your perspective?
Exactly. What's
on
your voice?
This? What's your
voice?
A
lot of people get lost in that. Yeah, they forget that really that perfecting their craft is not about learning how to use more boxes. It's really about learning how to really define their voice and their style as a storyteller, and embracing that and feeling comfortable in their skin, actually owning their style of production and what they bring to the films that they want to release to market. Actually, and I think that's actually a really good point. People really need to focus more on their voice and what they want to say, as opposed to experimenting with, you know, 14 different types of camera setups before they feel they've made a serious film.
Well, I think the other thing is that, like, well, that movie was shot, you know, this Oscar-winning movie was shot on Alexa, so if I shoot a movie with Alexa, then my chances are so much better to get an Oscar. Like, that's totally. Isn't that the mentality? Like, seriously? Like, oh, I have to get a red because that's what, like, The Avengers was shot on, so I want a $200 million budget, so I guess I have to shoot on the red. It's nutty. It really is nutty. I hope we've changed.
If we only felt comfortable stepping out on the road and driving a car, if we could have a $300,000 vehicle. I mean, we can still drive in a $2,000 bomb, but you know, it still gets us to A to B, hopefully. But it's fine to aspire towards those other lofty cameras and setups. But the main thing is, I think what people need to think about is, if I'm a great storyteller, if I've got an idea for telling a story, what can I resource around me that'll help enable me to tell that story?
Right.
Rather than give myself more excuses and delays and procrastinating about actually making that film.
Absolutely. And I hope today's conversation, Jason, has has woken a few people up, has inspired a few people to pick up the thing in their pocket and go tell a story, experiment, learn. I mean, there is no film development. There is no huge amounts of media that you have to buy and I mean, if you want to tell a story, there is no excuse. And that's what I hope this conversation, this interview has helped a few people today. So thank you for dropping the knowledge bombs. Now, I'm going to ask you a few questions that I ask all of my guests. What advice would you give a filmmaker wanting to break into the business today?
I would say you are your project's best advocate. So never, ever give up on it. If you give up on your project, if you waver, if you lose the love, nobody else is going to have the love for your project like you do. So you need to be the absolute champion for your project and never, ever lose sight of that. I think I see a lot of people with an idea that as soon as they start shopping it around or they start asking for opinions, they feel that it's probably a lesser thing than what they started out with, and they park it off to the side, and then they lose the love for it. I think, you need to be your project's best advocate. So never stop selling the concept of what you want to make. If you believe in it with all your heart, if you feel it's a thing you really want to make, it's your sole responsibility to be the champion for it. You need to pull everybody else on board, and you need to fly the flag all the time.
And I think you have to be free of the good opinion of others in many ways.
Yeah. Absolutely. In fact, seeking the advice and opinions of people around you that aren't your friends and family is probably the other thing I would say, is making sure you get some good independent reviews of your work. And it'll hurt the first time someone comes back to you and tears it to shreds. It's a horrible experience. But if you sit on it for 2 or 3 days and look at your work again with that in your mind, hopefully you can learn from the process. And certainly that's probably how I've grown as a filmmaker and a storyteller, is by exposing my work to people that I really respect, that don't have a personal association with me, that feel honest enough to actually really be honest about a project when I show that to them, and to take on board, to listen to their conversation with fresh ears and eyes after a few days when the pain is settled, and you can look at your work and actually learn from it and grow as a storyteller. I think is really important. Absolutely.
Now, can you tell me the book that had the biggest impact on your life or career?
The book that had the biggest impact on my life or career, I'm going to probably be a little controversial here and say it's going to be a book with no words.
Okay.
And I'm going to give you a book called The Arrival by Sean Tan.
Okay.
And I don't know if you've heard of that. He's a graphic novelist based in the western side of Australia. He won an Academy Award for an animation called The Lost Thing, I believe, a few years ago. And this graphical novel called The Arrival is an incredible story about what it's like to feel, to walk in the shoes of being an immigrant in a new country. Wow. But it's completely told through incredible illustrations, no words needed. It invents its own language through the book when you read it.
That's awesome.
The Arrival by Sean Tan. Definitely check that out. It's incredible.
Incredible book. Great choice.
It's like a storyboard, incredible storyboard.
Awesome. Now, what lesson took you the longest to learn, whether the film industry or in life?
The lesson that took me the longest to learn would have to be to never stop making, whether you feel you're a success or a failure, whether you feel you're inspired or not. There is no replacement for making and keeping your tools sharp and keeping your skills sharp. And I think always staying in the game, always going out, finding story, listening, making story all the time. Always refine your skills and keep going. Don't give yourself a year off from filmmaking. You need to keep making wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you need to keep making. Whatever that story is that's in front of you, keep making it.
And 3 of your favorite films of all time?
3 of my favorite films of all time. I'm going to keep it to documentary because that's probably my passion.
Okay.
The first one I would say would be Blackfish. Probably one of my all-time favorites.
Yeah, that's a great...
That story of Tilikum, the killer whale.
Oh,
incredible.
It killed an entire company. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I'm here in LA, so I saw what had happened. Like I went to SeaWorld like with my family because my girls wanted to go. I was like, I don't really want to go. Let's not support it. All right, we're gonna go once and that's it. Man, they changed everything. It was pretty remarkable that one movie knocked down a multi-million-dollar corporation. It's pretty amazing.
Completely. And if you want inspiration as a documentary filmmaker, like there is no greater inspiration than something like that. When you see the cause and effect of a film like that, it's incredible. The second film I would probably pick is Searching for Sugar Man.
Oh, what a wonderful film. Oh, God, I love that movie.
Yeah,
it was
totally loved it. And
Go ahead.
Sorry?
No, go ahead.
I was just saying large chunks of it were actually filmed on iPhone.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yes. Yeah, so look that up. Large chunks of the recreated historical footage, I think, was filmed with a 8mm film app on a smartphone.
That's great.
So check that out.
Because he was doing it. It's sad that he passed away, but I remember the filmmaker. He did it almost all by himself. Like he was editing for like 2 or 3 years, and then he got the Oscar, which was just like, oh my God! When I saw,
I mean, that is the ultimate indie film hustle. Searching for Sugar Man. This guy made it happen. Incredible story, made with really sparse resources. Yeah, beautifully.
What was that other one that just came out a few years ago? Is it the Walk the Line? About what you know what I'm talking about? The one that the guy across the Twin Towers.
Yeah. Tightrope.
Yes. Yeah, Tightrope. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, what an amazing documentary! I fell in love with that guy. He's crazy. I love him. Yeah. All right, I'm sorry. And the third one.
I got a third one for you. And that's a filmmaker called Brian Hertzlinger, and his documentary was My Date with Drew. Came out in 2004.
I remember that. I've seen that movie.
You remember that one?
Yeah, when he was
about making a.
When the stalker laws were a little less back then, apparently. But he wanted to. He wanted to date with Drew Barrymore, and he made a whole documentary about it.
In 30 days. Incredible. Just the ultimate challenge. Can you make a film in 30 days? And he didn't even own a camera. That was the incredible thing. He and his two friends had to go and beg, borrow, and steal a camera on a credit card, which they had to be able to get a refund on within 30 days. That was the premise to making their film.
Right.
So they knew they had a 30-day window to make, 30 days to go and find a date with Drew Barrymore. And I think Rotten Tomatoes actually called it the love it or hate it stalker-artsy. Like it was like I said, you probably could not make that film in 2018, but back in 2004, it's one of those heartwarming, very simply made films. The aesthetics in it, are very pure, very basic, but a super sweet story. And as a documentary filmmaker, so much hope in there for making story with minimal means.
That was awesome. That's awesome. Great choices, my friend. Great choices. Now, where can people find you and the work you do?
Look, probably the best place would be on Facebook to look up Filmbreaker, Filmbreaker. That's the page where I've been sharing most of my knowledge bombs and work of late. We've got a few influencers on there contributing. Basically, it's a space where people who want to learn how to make films with their smartphones can be tooled up, can be inspired. And we set that up in March this year with an aim of finding 10,000 people around the world that had a similar mindset, and we're now up to just over 30,000. So Filmbreaker on Facebook is definitely the place to connect, to stay in touch with what we're making, and check out our work.
Awesome, man. Thank you, Jason, again so much. This has been an amazing interview, amazing conversation, and I really do hope it inspires people out there in the tribe and whoever is listening to this to get out there and just go tell their story, man. It doesn't matter what you have the power in your hands.
Completely. Alex, wonderful being on your show. Thanks so much for the opportunity, mate. Really appreciate it.